My next guest is one of the 5 former Treasury secretaries who says they know how to stop this massive problem. Jack Lew. He served as Treasury Secretary in the Obama administration. Secretary, thank you for joining me. You say there is a solution to this. What is it?
Well, it's good to be with you, Stephanie. The reality is that if you don't audit taxes, if you don't have enforcement resources, you don't have any cops on the beat. And for the last 25 years, we've seen that the amount of resources available for tax enforcement has dropped by 50%. It was a big issue in dealing with Congress over these years. We couldn't get the money appropriated, and we knew that we were losing a lot of revenues. Current estimates are that under current law, we're losing about $7 trillion over 10 years because people aren't paying, firms aren't paying what's required. If you put a few small numbers on it, there are 4 million partnership tax returns, 140 a year are audited. Now, that doesn't mean everyone's cheating. It doesn't mean that this is anything other than saying everyone needs to follow the same rules. I've always believed that before you talk about any new revenues, you have to make sure people pay the taxes that are due under current law. And the simple, logic of hiring people, training people, and having the oversight is just overwhelming, which is what the 5 of us argue in that column.
But then why would we ever have allowed this to happen? For every dollar collected, you get $6 in return. This thing more than pays for itself. I'm talking about the IRS. So why would we ever have cut even one single staff member? If you look over the last 10 years, they've cut about 20%. Who on earth said, well, that's a good idea?
Well, I agree 100% with you, Stephanie, and I made that case to our Congress when I was at the Treasury Department and when I was at the Office of Management and Budget in 2 administrations. What we've seen over the years is that defunding the IRS became something that was seen as an accomplishment for some in Congress. I think right now you're seeing more bipartisan focus on having the IRS funded with the resources to do its job. And I think this is a very important moment. There are major proposals out there to change our tax laws, many of which I support and think are the right way to increase revenues. But the truth of the matter is, if we don't have a tax enforcement system that works, money leaks out of it and it will continue to. So this is something we need to do, whatever your views on new tax proposals. And I think that's one of the reasons why the 5 of us who don't agree on all of the proposals to raise new revenues agree 100% on this idea about tax enforcement.
I would guess that most Americans would say simply enforce what's on the books. That's how you address the tax gap. But let's talk about loopholes for a moment, because that ProPublica report has people across this country furious when they see the names of individuals who are paying almost nothing, corporations paying nothing. Can you help me understand why do these loopholes exist? Because the truth is, and I'm not defending Elon Musk, it's not necessarily Elon Musk's fault or Amazon's fault. They're legally not paying taxes. It's lawmakers' faults.
Well, I agree with that too, Stephanie. And I think that's one of the reasons why a number of the tax proposals that are currently pending make good sense, even if you weren't looking to raise money to pay for a big investment program.
Who is calling you on the phone right now, Secretary? Don't they know you're on television? Do you want to answer that? Would you like to answer it?
It's the one phone in my house that you can't turn off, and unfortunately, it's right here.
Well, when you're done, I'd like you to call that person and ask them to watch my show every day at 9 a.m., and then that would never happen. Okay, go back to these loopholes. You've got to look at the lawmakers, not the companies or the individuals.
Yeah, no, I think that our tax laws are riddled with legal ways to avoid taxes. Industries, have been, given the ability to structure their finances, to carry losses over, to pay taxes at low rates. The answer to that is changing tax policy. And I think if you look at a lot of the proposals that are out there, they would go a long way towards doing that. I do think you have to have a sharp distinction between people who are paying low taxes because the tax laws are broken and people who are not paying taxes because they're cheating.
Yeah, those are 2 different things.
People who are either making mistakes or cheating tax reform gets at changing the tax laws, we need to do both.
Those are two very different things. Do you actually think we're going to get that tax reform? Because you could talk to people across the country who care nothing about politics, and they would agree they want corporations to pay more. They want the super rich to pay more. But when you talked about certain industries and what they can carry over, that makes me think commercial real estate. That makes me think private equity. Those are industries that don't necessarily have lots of employees and voters, but they give enormous amounts of money to lawmakers. Is there actually the political will to close these egregious loopholes?
So my view on these issues was the same when I was in government as it is now. We have to close a lot of these loopholes. We have to have a tax system that raises money where it's earned. I think the environment right now is as good as it gets to get something significant done. First, there's a sense of unfairness in the way the economy distributes income and wealth that is deep. Secondly, there's a moment in time when there's a president and a Congress of the same party able to work together. Third, there's an ambitious investment agenda where the amount of ambition you have to invest in a world where you have to pay for the investments is limited by what you're able to raise. Now, I think if you look at what the Biden administration has proposed, if you get a big chunk of it enacted, it doesn't all have to be enacted to be of generational significance in terms of making the tax code more fair and in terms of investing in a future economy that works better for all Americans. So I think it's a moment when a lot can be done. I never thought it all would happen. It's a very ambitious program, but I think those who are saying if you get a big chunk of it done, you failed or making a mistake. If you get a big chunk of it done, that's an enormous accomplishment.